Waiting for everyone to get in. Take a little bit. Right, just gonna give it one more minute just for folks to get in and get online here. Right. I think we can get started. Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone. I guess it's not afternoon yet. Good morning and welcome to the second in our summer AI series. Today, we're going to dive into the ethical, legal, and moral considerations of artificial intelligence. We're happy to have you join us today. It's going to be an important and insightful conversation. We are going to kick off today just with a little bit of housekeeping. We have just item on our agenda. We'll kind of do this welcome, introductions, jump right into really the conversation and discussion. And then we will have a Q&A period at the end. And I just want to take a minute to direct you to the Q&A button. It's at the top of the screen, typically in Microsoft Teams. You can enter your question there. And our team today will just be helping to moderate and share those questions out. We do have a fairly large group so that we might not get to all questions that are asked during the time period that we have today, but we can respond to as many as we have time for. If you see a question in the Q&A that you want to hear the response to, this is one of the kind of neat features of Teams, you can actually upvote for those questions. So we will see that. We'll see like quite a few people are kind of upvoting that particular question. So we can make sure to ask that in the time that we do have. So the University of St. Thomas is inspired by the Catholic intellectual tradition to educate students to be morally responsible leaders who think critically, act wisely, and work skillfully to advance the common good. We do have 8 schools and colleges, and we serve over 10,000 undergraduate and graduate students at 3 different campuses. We have a campus in St. Paul, one in downtown Minneapolis, and then a third campus in Rome. At St. Thomas Executive Education, our mission is to connect individuals and their organizations to the knowledge and skills they need to succeed in today's ever-changing business world. We offer professional development programs in a variety of topics that are offered to individuals as well as organizations through group enrollment and custom design program options. Through our expert faculty and interactive programs, we are here as a resource for the Twin Cities business community. If you or your organization is interested in learning more, we're happy to connect with you and determine what is the best option. For our introductions today, well, my name is Lindsay Lowe. I'm the Senior Director of Executive Education, and I'm going to be here today throughout the webinar, just assisting, helping to moderate the Q&A. Carly Grant is online today. She is our Marketing Manager, and she'll be helping with moderation and Q&A as well. And now I'm happy to introduce our speaker. Jules Porter is an attorney, business law professor, legal analyst, artificial intelligence developer, and a video game developer who enjoys simplifying complex legal issues to make the law more approachable for all. Jules is an associate attorney at Ed Shaw Law Firm, where she practices business law, family law, criminal law, and intellectual property law. She's also a game director at Seraph 7 Studios, a console video game development company that provides work-study experience for local students. Jules is also an AI developer and trainer who works to improve the analytical capabilities of various large language and natural language models. She's also a proud U.S. Marine Corps vet and a Tommy alum. I can think of no one better to kind of talk about the subject matter and dive into this topic today. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jules.
Fantastic. Share my screen here. All right, thank you so much for that amazing introduction, Lindsay, and thank you so much, Carly, also, and all the help and all the work you guys did to put together this great summer of AI. So I'm very excited to speak about the ethical, legal, and moral considerations of AI. So we're going to kind of lay some foundations. We're going to talk what is going on with your privacy when it comes to AI. We're also just going to look a bit at the road ahead when it comes to some of these frameworks. All right, so I was already given an amazing introduction. Just a couple notes. So I do have my JD and my MBA from the University of St. Thomas. I also have an aeronautics degree. My minor was intelligence and security, as well as a theology degree where I focused on angelology and religious symbolism. And I also have kind of a wealth of just graduate certificates, so in C++, Python, some nanotechnology, quantum machine learning, and things like that. I also use the Unreal Engine 5 to develop my video games. And I mention that because if any of you are interested or you know some great kids or a young person super interested in getting into video gaming and making the games, the Unreal Engine 5 is free to use. And there's so many great programs that are free to teach them how to use it and kind of manifest their imagination. So I just always like to plug that out there. So we're going to go over some key definitions. We're going to set a good baseline, and we're going to talk about the ethical, legal, and moral considerations in the framework of the good, the bad, the ugly. All right, we're just going to get right into it. We're also going to talk about a few regulatory approaches, as well as a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that's kind of been circulated here in the United States, and then we'll open the floor up for some discussion. Please put your questions in the chat. I definitely want to make sure I'm answering the things that you guys want to know about. All right, let's kick it off with some questions. You guys, this is interactive, so let's go. So NVIDIA, what powered NVIDIA's rise to become the most valuable company in the world? So I give you a little hint there that I'm looking for an AI related factor, right? So I'll give you guys just a few moments, maybe put your thoughts in the chat. We'll kind of see who gets maybe a little bit close. I try to give you a bit of a hint with the picture here. All right, so we'll wait about, I don't know, a few seconds. All right, some people are saying chips. Keep going, keep going. A little bit deeper. Somebody said the release of LLM. Okay, yeah, so these things are what I'm looking at are actually used to process. Oh, we're getting closer. We got processors, but what type of processors? People writing code. Yeah, AI processors, maybe. All right, here we go. Let's get to the answer here. And the answer is GPUs, the graphical processing unit. So, and this is what is basically used to power. It is the brains of AI. So in your computer, you're probably familiar with your CPUs. Those are generally made by Intel, and it kind of says, hey, your Intel i7 processor, that's your CPU, your computer processing unit. And what that does is it's basically kind of a good generalist. It keeps all the things in your computer moving, going, and flowing. Now, your GPU, it's not a good generalist. It's good at doing one specific thing extremely well. So the GPU is actually what's being used to power up our AI, which NVIDIA makes some of the world's best GPUs. Therefore, they are now the world's most profitable company. And if you're a gamer, you exactly know how important that GPU is to your system. If you're not a gamer, you probably never even paid attention to your GPU. All right, let's move forward. Let's talk some definitions. All right, so let's talk just what is artificial intelligence, right? So just really quickly, it's how we are trying to simulate human intelligence in machines. Basically, we're trying to teach machines to think like a human, right? And we've based it on what's called neural networks, right? So this is how the machines are learning to make connections between things. So similar to humans, they're learning by association. So for instance, when I was a little kid, I used to always want to go with my dad to the gas station, right? He would fill up the gas, he would go inside, and he would always bring me out a chocolate milk, right? So even as an adult, when I smell gas, I'm thinking about chocolate milk and my dad, right? Because I've learned to associate those things together. And AI learns similarly, right? And so because it learns by making all these connections, it can often find connections that we humans might miss or may not be so obvious. So for instance, if you ask AI, hey, what is a similarity between a supernova, right, an exploding star, and when I compost my banana in my backyard? Okay, so AI will think for, maybe 5 seconds, and then it will say, hey, Jules, here's your answer. So when you have the supernova, you basically have a bunch of chemical processes that are going on that are also producing heat, but at a very fast rate. When it comes to your compost, right, there's also a chemical reaction, much slower. It's producing heat and energy, much less, but it is. And therefore, there's a connection that you have between a supernova and your composting of your banana, right? And so the more we continue to train and we label data to teach AI, the more it strengthens those neural networks and those connections and able to find new connections, right? So this is how it learns based on how we learn. All right, so let's talk about some of the different terminology because technically these are all sort of parts of AI, though they're all a little bit different, right? So when we use the term autonomous, right, that basically means, okay, so when you send me an email and I'm out of the office, right, it'll see you sent me an email and it will automatically send you my out of the office reply. So that is a very basic, if this happens, then do that type of just autonomous system, right? Then you have your bots. I think we all remember when Twitter first started, you could like tweet something and tweet it with a certain hashtag, then a little bot will catch it and then retweet it out to everybody who's following that particular hashtag or something. So that's cool. So that's a bot. So those are really, really kind of simple processes, maybe more on the coding end than we have the full kind of artificial intelligence as we understand it today. Right, then you have your chatbot. So this is getting a little more complex, right? This is a company, when you want to go talk to their customer service, they say, you got to talk to our chatbot first, right? So then you ask it a question and it's already pre-programmed with a set of answers, whatever the company wants the answer to be to that question. Of course, that gets really frustrating if you're the end user and you're asking a question that the chatbot was not programmed to answer, and you're like, can I please just talk to a human being, right? So that is your chatbot, right? Large language models, right? So this is the huge, right, all of, I guess, human knowledge that we have that we've tried to put into this thing in order for it to answer our questions and synthesize and do some fun things. So that is your large language models. It has generally just more power, more information than the average person would ever need to know or pull from, but it's basically built to be kind of that full generalist. So that's your large language model. These are huge, right? Paraphrasing AI. So this is what, I am an adjunct professor at St. Thomas. So when I catch students using AI, which I don't know why they use AI in my class, because, I've developed AI for the past like 2.5 years. So I always catch it. But they say, no, I didn't use generative AI, the one that we'll get to next. I didn't use ChatGPT. I only use paraphrasing AI. So they'll say, I wrote out something, but I thought it wasn't that clear. So, Grammarly, I had Grammarly and it told me, hey, you could actually write it this way and it would look better. It will be more clear. And that's what I did, right? So they get caught because generally the paraphrasing AI is pulling from a generative AI like ChatGPT, right? And so it's kind of has that same sort of formulaic feel. And so generative AI is when you purely ask it to create something and you don't really give it any information to go off on. You maybe give it a scenario, you maybe tell it what you want it to do, and it fully generates a response for you. Whereas paraphrasing AI, you're giving it the information already, and then it's just rewording it for it to sound better. So those are kind of the differences between the two. And I will say, just for those of you on the call who might be lawyers or some type of profession that works with confidentiality, you do have to be careful with things like Grammarly when you kind of upgrade to the AI feature, right? Because if you have confidentiality concerns and it's always looking at everything you're writing, right, and it's recording that and it's learning from that. So you have to really be careful about what you're writing when you have that Grammarly feature turned on. And when you're working on very confidential things, like if you have social security numbers or something in there, you want to turn it off so that it is not learning from the data, because it never forgets it. It will always remember that person associated with that particular social security number. All right, so let's move on. I also want you guys to know what GPT means. It means a generative pre-trained transformer. And so that's basically just an easier way or a more efficient way for it to send the queries and get the information to you. All right, So now let's talk about some of the types of AI that we have. So these are some of the technical terms, but I think it's just kind of cool to go through it so you can understand some of the capabilities that we either have or that we're working on. All right, so text to text. This is kind of what we've just been talking about. You say, hey, AI, awesome AI, can you please draft a letter to my mom telling her that I can't make it to the family reunion this year, whatever. So it'll go, boom, it'll draft your letter. You can tell it a tone, you can ask it to tweak things, but that's basically text to text. You're putting in a written prompt and it's spitting you out a written response, right? Then there's text to speech. So this is where you're typing something or you take a document, right? And then it reads it and outputs it in words. So this is really good for people who need that more accessible technology, a person who might be blind or have some type of visual impairment, or just if you don't have time to sit there and just read it yourself, right? You can have it read it out loud to you. So to varying degrees of awesomeness, right? Some can be really robotic and bad and not really have much inflection. Others are much better. So speech to speech. So speech to speech is definitely superior and better than text to speech, because in text to speech, right, the AI is trying to figure out, how should I say this? Where should I put the emphasis on this word? How should I interpret that comma versus the semicolon versus the period? Now in speech to speech, it doesn't have to do that, right? It's taking speech that somebody is saying and then it's outputting that audio. So this is really cool. So let's say, so we all know James Earl Jones, right? The awesome voice of Darth Vader for all of you Star Wars fans out there. So when he passed away, or before he passed away, he said, hey, Disney, hey, Lucas Arts, you guys can definitely continue to use my voice for your future Star Wars things, anything you want Darth Vader in. So what that means is they're taking samples of his voice. They'll probably have an actor who sounds similar to James Earl Jones or who has a similar speaking cadence to him. And then they'll use the AI to align that performance closer to the actual James Earl Jones's voice. So that's speech to speech. You get really good outputs that way. All right, text to image. So this is when you go to something like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney and you say, hey, can you please make me an image? Let's just stick with Darth Vader, of Darth Vader as Santa Claus in what is it, with the reindeer in the sleigh. There we go. All right, so it says, all right, and it produces the image. Usually it's going to be very bad, right? You have to ask it maybe about 100 times just to get one good usable image, but that's your text to image. All right, now you have image to image. So this is where you already have something that you drew. So you already have your picture of Darth Vader in the sleigh as Santa Claus, and you want the AI to output that image in the style of Salvador Dali. So you say, all right, take this, please output it in the image of Salvador Dali, and it does, and it looks much better than if you, and it's much faster than if you were to do text to image, right? Because you've already shown this is the kind of what I want it to look like. Please just make it in a different style. Much easier for the AI to do that, to produce you a better output where you don't have to iterate so much. All right, text to video. Right now, this is very bad. Or basically you're asking AI, hey, can you make a cool montage of like Prince different videos from just across the decades, okay? And so then it'll put together some type of video montage of Prince, but right now it'll look really bad. Have any of you ever seen the video of like Will Smith eating spaghetti? It's really bad. I mean, it's from a few years ago, so it shows you just how far we've come today, but it is one of the most horrible videos I've ever seen in my life. It is definitely its own horror movie in itself, but that is your kind of image to video. All right, so I'm sorry, text to video. Image to video is a little bit better. You're basically making the images move or using the images as a baseline for the world that it's building the video around. So those can be kind of cool. It's still definitely in development, but it's definitely better than the image to video. And then you have your text to animation. Right now, everything that we're trying to do with animation is not good, right? It is still very bad. But in about 2 years or so, it's going to be where it's usable. So, and this is really something that democratizes animation for all. Animation is one of the hardest things to learn. I've been trying to learn animation for the past year, and I'm definitely like, yes, I need to hire a veteran animator because you can put your all into it, but it just takes a lot of time to learn that. So being able to have something where an artist could put out an image and being able to animate it in a way that they see is extremely helpful for more people to be able to put out animated films. But right now, the technology we're about 3 years away from it actually being usable. All right, multimodal. So what this is this is an AI that can do a combination of these things, right? So instead of just being able to take your text prompt and giving you a text output, it can take your text prompt and give you an image. It can take your text prompt and give you video, right? Or you can talk to it and it'll produce text or speech or something like that. So that is multimodal. It's able to do a combination of things, of these things that we just went over. And then you have agents. And what agents can do is not only can they do a combination of those things, but they can actually do things in the real world for you. So a good example is maybe Siri. You say, hey, Siri, I want to get up at 5 in the morning. Please set an alarm. Siri says, okay, your alarm is set. So you're all good. All right. So to take that a step further, being able to act in the real world, you would say, Siri, not only do I want you to set my alarm at 5 a.m., but can you also check on flights from Minneapolis to LAX on August 30th in the afternoon, right? So then it goes, it says, all right, I found some flights. You're all right, I want business class. All right, here's business class. It'll cost you $800. Here's the ideal one. You say, oh, that's great. Go ahead and buy it and pay with the Visa account or whatever. So that's the agent. It would actually be able to do that at your request. All right, so here's my personal prediction, which is that these things are basically going to gravitate towards being personal language models. So not as huge, right? Because right now these LLMs, they take up as much energy and electricity as like the entire country of the Netherlands, right? So that's a lot. We don't need all of that for our personal use, right? So this is something that you can run locally on your computer, which also increases your safety because it's not taking your data and blasting it out to some data center and then coming back with an answer for you. So it's a little faster, it's a little bit more secure right there on your system, right? And then it'll be sort of a generalist AI. So as we talked about multimodal with how it can do a variety of things, that's what it'll be able to do and also take actions for you in the real world, right? So I think that's kind of where we're moving to. We have Apple Intelligence that's already kind of starting that trend of having things run locally on your machine and being an agent for you and being able to do things in the real world. I think it's going to continue that way. All right, so let's talk about the good as we now move into some of these frameworks. And I wanted to highlight this image in particular. So as you guys see, many of these images, I purposely designed this using AI, just so that you could see, hey, you can have just your basic PowerPoint presentation, throw stuff on there, and AI can actually move it around and design it to where now you have some good human-centric design. But this image here is a combination of me and an AI I created named Zora. Who's based off of the personality of Zora Neale Hurston. All right, so there's a lot of talk about AI slop, right, and how it's producing these images that are just like Frankenstein's. But, right, I think where we're moving towards is the artist being able to use AI to supplement their art. So this image here was about 70% me and 30% Zora, helping me make the image better, faster. Right, so I think that is kind of the use of AI that we're going for in art. But right, the text image or the image to image type of art does make art more accessible. It helps people provide concept art faster to help you visualize what it is that they're trying to tell you a lot faster. And I think there is a good use case for that, even though, yes, not only does it drive artists crazy, right, but we've basically stolen from every artist in human history to be able to have this technology. And that's its own problem in itself. But we're going to talk about the good. So we're going to pause that and get to the good. All right, so here's the good with AI. It gives you a good starting point. You don't have to start with a blank page. And sometimes that in itself is golden, right? It gives a little guy a chance. So speaking to like lawyers in particular, right? Solo practitioners don't always have the funding and the money to hire paralegals and law clerk and the legal assistants that they really need in order to get all the work done and take in all the clients that they need to take in to be profitable and be able to give them due diligence for every case, right? So this with AI, now you can have it draft your awesome cease and desist letter. It can do a lot of that initial drafting for you in about 30 seconds. And then you basically go through, you have to proofread it. You go through and you read it, you make sure it's good, and then you can sign it and send it. So if you're a paralegal and you're sitting here listening to this, you're like, wait a second, and we'll talk about that later. But for right now, it really does. It's a big force multiplier with helping smaller studios, smaller businesses really have a chance to compete, take on more business, and be more profitable. All right, so it's really good for brainstorming and ideation. I was kind of bummed. I saw an article the other day and it said, the biggest use case of AI is basically for searches. And I think that's just because Google now has it where it just automatically gives you an AI answer, whether you wanted one or not. So they're kind of counting that. But the real great use of AI is this brainstorming and ideation, because again, it makes these really fast connections, right, that to humans aren't always as obvious. And so it's really cool. It's awesome for brainstorming. All right. It can quickly analyze information. So that's really great when it comes to efficiency, right? Finding these patterns in just huge data sets in minutes, where it would take like a human analyst like a week, right? So that is just a big difference. Also in detecting fraud, because it can detect and determine these patterns very fast, and it makes super fast comparisons. A great use of AI, especially for those of you who might be looking for work, right, is to take your resume to kind of, again, you have to consider privacy because it's not going to forget what you tell it. So you might want to change your name or something like that. But you can give it your resume and you could say, hey, how does my resume stack up to a candidate who would be successful for, and give it the job position? And then boom, not only will it tell you, hey, here's where it stacks up, it'll say, here are the suggested things that I suggest you change. You can actually even ask it to tell you why. And it'll say, here's why you should make these changes. Here's what the successful candidate's resume would likely look like. And so that's really great insights for people that maybe don't have a great alumni team like we do here at St. Thomas that help you with your career and professional development, that can look over your resume and give you pointers. But you can use AI for things like that to really give you insights that are hard for you to get on your own. And then again, it can give you some really fast summaries, but that's both the good point and a bad point. So we're going to talk about that again when we get to the bad, right? It's really great at summarizing documents. It can summarize, I don't know, the United States Marine Corps, Supreme Court, sorry, not Marine Corps, the United States Supreme Court decision that came out. You could say, hey, can you please quickly explain this to me? And it could break down the key points for you. The summaries are actually pretty accurate. When you actually give it the data first and you ask it to summarize, that's where it gets pretty accurate. But it can get inaccurate fast when you're asking it to pull things on its own. Okay, the other thing is human-centric design. So one of the big things that we were teaching AI, and especially for all the models, not just the reasoning models, is how to lay out the information in ways that human beings best understand it. Lawyers are horrible at this. I think like the stats are 33% of lawyers are visual learners, or like over 75% of human beings generally are visual learners. And so there's a huge mismatch between how lawyers present information and how people actually consume it, right? You want to make a document that helps guide the reader's eye and also makes it easier for them to go back and reference later. So human-centric design. Again, I made these PowerPoints, right, just using AI, just throwing the information on the slide, and then boom, it outputs it in a particular way. So that's super helpful, and that's built in now to both like Adobe products and Microsoft products. So definitely you should use it. All right, it does a lot of the mundane tasks for you. You know, drafting that email, it can do it for you. It can summarize things. But one thing that it's really good at, I'm sorry, that I think is being underused because of how education is really side-eyeing AI, because it is depriving students of just some good reading comprehension skills and writing skills. But it's really good at tailoring things in real time to the students' needs, right? So as they're going through, as they're learning things, the AI can sense, oh, you didn't understand this well. Let me break it down this particular way because wording it this way seems to work well for you, right? You can also take something like the theory of relativity and say, hey, can you explain this to a fifth grader? And it can in under 100 words, right? So it's really good at simplifying information. And it's also good for catching in real time when something's misunderstood and then wording it differently in a way that helps it make more sense to the individual. All right, advances in medicine. So this is the real reason why one of the real reasons, in addition to just money and greed, but this is one of the real reasons why we haven't really shut down AI, and that's its advances in medicine and just how helpful it can be to curing diseases, finding solutions to things like cancer, right? Because it can just analyze this data so fast. So for instance, I think the human being, we can take in, I don't know, maybe 5 bits of information a minute, right? If we were to kind of conceptualize the data into like digital data, maybe 5 bits. But, AI can take on, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of bits of data in, a second. And so it's just much faster at going through, seeing the similarities, seeing the patterns, and also simulations and testing, and seeing what actually works. So when it comes to just curing some of these diseases that have plagued us for a long time, AI is very good at that. But that also produces some bad, as we'll talk about a little bit later. All right, again, accessibility and inclusivity, right? One of the coolest things, so St. Thomas, we have these cool business competitions, the Fowler competition, so shout out to Ron Fowler. But I got a chance to be a judge in these competitions. And lately, AI has been more and more a part of some of the solutions that the students want to work on and some of the problems that they want to work on. And one of the problems is sign language. And I thought that was really cool. So there was a company that wanted to basically have an AI sign language interpreter that could both take your sign language and put it into just like text for like people who don't know sign language, and take your text and then, or take your language, right, and then turned it into like sign language for the person who is deaf. I thought that was really cool, right? That's an awesome use of AI that a lot of the big companies are not even starting to research or to develop. But it's also really good at instant language translation. But again, there could be a problem there, because as we talk about the bad, AI does just randomly lie, right? So do you want people at the UN really depending upon this instant language translation from the AI? I would argue yes and no, right? You want some human checking it, maybe in real time to correct it if it's wrong. But we're kind of not there to really fully depend on these systems just yet. And that's the same with driverless vehicles. This is really cool, right? We can eliminate some DUI risk, right? We can eliminate some distracted drivers, but we're also eliminating privacy, right? So, there's I forget his name, but there's an awesome guy who does a talk. He does a lot of like forensics with computers and things of that nature, and it's so easy. So like with your Tesla, right? It tracks everywhere you go, every place you stop, how long you stayed there. So when it comes to solving crimes and murders, if they can get access to your Tesla, they could say, oh yeah, he wasn't there, or they could say, oh yeah, he was definitely there at this time for this period of time. So we just have to think about that as we move to driverless cars. Do we want every place we go, how long we stayed there, all of our location data basically tracked and given to this company, easily subpoenable? I'm a person who just doesn't like that. We just can't do, like, there's no conversation that you can really have anymore that can just stay private, that isn't being recorded somewhere. And I just feel like we should be able to have conversations that are forgotten. That's me. And I should be able to go to my mom's house without 15 companies now knowing about it. All right, so let's talk about the bad. So we kind of moved into the bad there with the good. All right, so let's get a little bit into the bad. But first, a question. All right, why was June 26, 2024 such an important date for privacy? And here we're looking at a social media factor. What do you guys think? I'll pause for about a minute and we'll see what you got. Why was this a bad or such an important date for privacy? Maybe in a negative way regarding social media. Oh, we got some people say TikTok. All right, kind of close. Social media, but maybe that's the wrong platform. Okay, we got Grok. Okay, yeah. All right, that's kind of going in with X. Meta. Okay, close. Close. With Meta can use our images. That is very close. So let's move forward. Not only can Meta use your images, right, but everything you've ever written to Meta. And so the reason why that was an important date was that was the date that for the EU, that all EU citizens that had a Meta account, so be it Instagram or Facebook, all of their data would just be used to further train Meta's AI models. They did have an opt-out for EU users, but the opt-out was at the discretion of Meta. So you had to ask to opt out, you had to put why you would like to opt out, and they got to decide yes or no, you should opt out. Well, so the EU citizens had to be notified by law, right? So they have laws in EU where when they're going to do something like this, they have to notify the citizens. So all the citizens were notified. Many tried to opt out. Many more contacted their elected officials, and their elected officials were able to shut that down, right? So even to this date, the EU users, their privacy, their information that they've put on these Meta, applications are protected. Now, for the United States, American citizens, not only did they not have to notify us, they've already entered all of your data, right? And they will continue to enter all data that you continue to post. Everything you've ever posted on Facebook, everything you've ever put on Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads, all of that has already been used to train the model and will in perpetuity be used to further train their models, right? But it's important to really think about that, right? This means that this is a model that's been created from the data of like your crazy uncle, right? Which that's not a great model, right? But also you didn't even have a chance to say, no, I don't want my data. You didn't have a chance to close your account and delete your information because they didn't even have to notify you, right? So this is just one of the reasons why we definitely need more privacy regulation and consumer protections in the United States, right? So at least can we please be notified so we have a chance to just say, no, thank you. I don't want my data to be used in that manner. But also, yeah, even for the people who opted out, right? If somebody else mentioned them and tagged them in a post, then they would still use that and put that into their AI system. And the thing is, for the AI and the way the models are built, once you bake the data into the model, there's no taking it out, right? That's the way we built it. Once it's there, it's there. And generally, the new model is built on top of the old model, right? So that's why this data is just always going to be there, and we're just building on top of it. All right, so let's more about the dark side. So of course we have this photorealistic generation, deep fakes, or in some cases, and so obviously that's very concerning. The one good thing is that humans are very visual. So for all the visual things, right, we're able to be sleuths and we can go in and we can figure it out. Like, the shadow's wrong. This is not aligned. This car over here doesn't look right. So we can kind of figure out that this was AI generated now, right? And the same for videos, because AI right now is not very good at like sensing the 3D space, right? So we can kind of see the problems. Now, when it comes to deepfake audio, that is extremely hard for us to detect, right? That is a real concern, right? Especially for things that might have to go through the court system. If you're depending on audio as part of your evidence, there could be a possibility that it was deepfake made by AI, and that is extremely hard for us to detect. So that's something that we definitely need to look more at. And as I'm saying these things, yes, we could have created systems alongside the one that we have that could say, hey, that could have labeled different images as being from different artists, right? And we could have created a system that whenever that particular artist image is used in some way in a bigger one, that they get some fraction of a cryptocurrency paid to some account. So they're in some way so they're in some way compensated for their art. But we didn't do that. We could have created systems alongside the AI that helps detect when AI was used, or that it has some type of certification or stamp or watermark or just something where we could easily see this was made by AI. But we decided not to do that, and there were no laws telling us that we had to. So it wasn't done. And these are just things to think about. Is this the route that we want to continue to go? So right here, this picture, the second one from the left says, never forgotten, no confidentiality, right? So that's some things you need to remember. Everything that you ask an AI model, it's not going to necessarily forget it. The data goes somewhere, right? And the data is seen by someone, right? So when I worked on the back ends of some of these systems, if you're a lawyer, you're asking it a question about a case you're working on. If you use too much information, you have to be careful about whether or not you're breaching attorney-client privilege, whether or not you're breaching your duty for confidentiality, right? Because, hey, I have nothing to do with your case, and I'm able to read all this information that you just asked it and the response, right? For quality control reasons, but I'm still able to do it. All right, and so the other issue is who owns these things that are created by AI. So this image here that we see, this one was probably 60% me, 40% Zora. So the question is, who owns it, right? So in my case, it's a bit different because I made the AI, right? And I made the prompt for the image, and I made the image that I then submitted to Zora in order to help me improve. So that weighs a little bit more in my favor. But generally, the way that courts have kind of shaken out on this, and they're still sorting through it, is that if it's not made by a human being, right, that even though we're giving it some wording, right, for it to be sort of that unique expression, and the wording that we give it, the prompt is unique, right, the actual thing outputting it is not a human being, right, it's a machine. Right, so therefore, anybody can use these images that are being created by AI. And the only time you will have some kind of like protection in the image is to the degree that you have transformed the image and kind of made it something other than what the AI initially output. So that's just something to think about. Of course, that's still working its way kind of through the courts to figure that out. And another way, I always have to point this out because it's still bad at it, is that it's legendarily bad at like making hands and fingers. It's just it's horrible. It's really bad. So that's another way if you're looking at, hey, was this image made by AI? Are there 15 fingers on the hand, right? Or are there like 3 limbs? Okay, so let's go to these hallucinations. We all know that AI right now is not trustworthy. But even though we like know that generally, right? When we're writing our prompts and we're getting the responses, we sometimes forget that we're supposed to read and check it, right? And that's because when we just start reading the start of it, everything seems legit, right? Everything seems confident and good to go, but it'll just randomly lie. And that's because like we have our TI-85s, right? Where we can ask it, hey, here's the equation, whatever it outputs, we know that if our answer differs from our TI-85 calculator, that we are wrong and the TI-85 is correct. But when it comes to AI, not so much, right? The AI even gets math wrong because it's a prediction machine. It's not a calculator. It's not, and it's kind of built upon, humans, all of our knowledge, the way we make connections. And one thing that we've inadvertently taught it is that to be human is to err, right? It's to be maybe 90% right and 10% wrong every now and then, right? It also learned from us bad writing, right? How to be overly verbose and repetitive, right? So that's hard for us to get that out of its system as well. And some of that lack of academic rigor, right? It's also learned that, hey, you don't have to be too specific about, your citations and where you're getting things because humans aren't too specific, from the data that it was trained on. So again, for the AI was trained on all the internet, but things that were behind paywalls, so a lot of like academic journals, things in Westlaw, right? It wasn't trained on that information. So it's trained on the publicly accessible information. And so that's why it has sometimes just all of these random issues because human beings have all of these random issues when we're writing things out. All right. So
And
again, this
Jules, I'm
part.
giving you a 5-minute warning here.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So you guys can kind of see the rest. We talked about how it trespasses. It does not care about your intellectual property and it consumes a whole lot of energy. And of course, the planetary impact is currently unknown, but we can just kind of say maybe right now bad unless we start doing things to correct and to fix it. All right, and this is just another thing. If you look at the Berne Convention, there's these moral rights that are given to basically international folks. The United States did sign on, but not for the moral rights part, right? And this is basically the rights of artists to be able to say, hey, I don't want you to make this derogatory depiction of my work. I don't want you to change it. So here's a cool image. This is, of course, Michelangelo's David, but made into a cyberpunk thing. Would Michelangelo agree with this? Right? So that's kind of some of the questions. Some artists where we're making this AI art that's based upon their works, but do they actually agree with what we've done here? Right? And we could have like tried to put a system in where we could have it say yes or no, where artists could opt out, but we chose not to do that, or at least for the ones who are alive or whose copyrights are still valid. All right, so we kind of talked about this biased data set. So one thing that I want to plug in here is that right now is definitely the time to get into AI if you're ever interested at all in helping shape its direction. So we already know it has all of this biased data. Right now, we can consider AI kind of like a preteen. It has all this bad information, but we're trying to teach it some morality. We're trying to teach it what to do with the bad information that it has. And so there's different companies like Outlier. There's a company called Data Annotation that actually hires people. It hires expert. They pay anywhere from like $35 to $60 an hour. It's fully remote. And all you're doing is you're going in, you're asking the AI different questions. You're seeing what the output is. You're making sure the output is not dangerous, but you're telling it, here's what you did wrong. Here's what you did right. And here is what the perfect response looks like. And we need people from all walks of life doing that to really test it and to really help make AI just a more ethical system with better outputs. And this is a better way of developing the new models of AI than just pulling everything from Facebook, right? We actually have data now that's curated, and that's kind of where we want to go. But one thing that we need to remember is that AI is still going to replace, numerous professions, even if some of this technology and some of the things that were promised are still a few years out. I mean, it's half a decade from now, just 5 years from now, this world is going to be completely different. And I think these are things that we need to think about. And one thing I also want to hit is just this lost history, right? So right now we also have people dictating to AI. AI is writing emails, AI is writing the letters, right? Then it gets sent. It gets sent to a person who's not reading the email. They just have AI summarize it. And sometimes even they have the text to speech reading it out loud, right? And then they go back and they dictate to AI to write a response, right? So this means people aren't really reading anymore. People aren't really writing anymore. And as we continue down this trend, we need to think about what that does for society if we have people that have significantly less reading and writing comprehension skills, right? And also lost history. So right now, right, with the way politics are, is there's a trend to not teach certain history, to not teach Black history in school. right? But there's also a trend when it comes to curating the data for AI data sets to not do things that are not safe for work. So what that often means is that anything that has to do with the civil rights movement, or things that have happened in America, to marginalized populations, that we're not teaching it what to do with that. We're just saying, hey, that's not safe to work. Let's kick it down the can. But as we're using AI more and more to answer questions, to teach, to do things, and it's replacing sometimes libraries, we're getting in a really dangerous spot where we are losing history, and we're losing, the truth of just kind of what's happened in history as well. And that's just kind of a dangerous place to be in, where we really need to think about that and start putting things in place in order to shift away. But we also need to really start preparing for massive employment shifts, right? Jobs that are assistants and things like that are likely to be going away, replaced by AI. And there's just going to be massive market changes. So we really need to start thinking about how we can develop as just human beings, just more manual skills, right? And right now there is a thing where we say, hey, but we still need the human touch, right? We say, how can we make sure lawyers aren't replaced? If the AI will, in 5 years, be able to do the work of a lawyer, right? We say it's the human touch, right? It is the passion that lawyers bring to their arguments, and it's the way that we can talk with and help our clients. All right, but by 2035, AI, and especially the voice technology, will be more sympathetic. We'll be able to do more things. So we have to start thinking about what happens when there's less people working, right? There's less jobs out there, right? Maybe, yes, there will be an increase in happiness. Some people say, yes, I can go out and enjoy nature. I can just go write a book for my own enjoyment and do these things. But then how are we bringing money in? If people don't have money to buy things or to consume things, then what's the point of all of these, automated services and things like that? All right, so I'm going to stop in a little bit. I do want to hit on quickly some regulatory approaches, and then I'll stop for questions. So there are some laws out there, right, that are basically the only safeguards we have right now when it comes to consumer protection and your data, right? And they're generally originating from the EU. The EU is basically the leader in data protection when it comes to AIs and other technology. The United States has taken an approach of, hey, we just basically want to be the leaders in everything. So it's okay if you kind of abuse our citizens' data and don't really respect their privacy. But other places are saying, no, 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 we want to slow down the development of AI so that we can ensure safeguards in place so that, human history doesn't become a sci-fi movie where now there's a dystopian, future, right? Where we can kind of control the pace, get some good policies in place that meet the moment and kind of go from there. The most recent is the AI Act that was actually enacted by the EU, and that puts just further restrictions on data and how data is classified, and then how free moving it can be based upon the classification. All right. Of course, America, we're just basically taking away safeguards. And I believe the White House just recently came out and said, hey, we also want to discourage individual states from adopting policies that safeguard their citizens' data from AI. Because in order to get a better AI, you need millions and millions of data points. The only way to get millions and millions of data points, they think, is to just take it from the citizens. Right. But there are some things such as an AI Bill of Rights that has been circulated. And just one little stat that I just want to throw, and then I'll stop for questions, is IBM did a study of C-suite executives, tech executives, and they found only 24% said that they have any component to secure things, and 70% said that they have not had security as a single factor in their development of AI. So that in itself also is very, very, very dangerous. So I will kind of stop right there. I'll open the floor up for questions. You'll be able to get some slides if you really want to look at the AI Bill of Rights. But just some of the key things are the right to opt out, to say, no, I don't want to be part of whatever this system is, the right to speak to a human. So whenever a government system is making a decision about you, that you have the right to, one, ask, why did you make this decision? What is it based on? But we have to remember, AI will lie, right? It can just make up some decision later or some explanation later for its decision. But you have the right to say, why did you make this decision? And then you have the right to appeal to a human being. So these are the rights we want people to have. You don't actually currently have that. You don't have the right now to talk to a human being instead of just having to be governed by the decision that the AI made about you. which can be very concerning. All right, any questions?
Awesome. It looks like we have a few questions here. So the first one is Apple had a commercial where the Office quote unquote clown was seen as an asset after he used AI to draft a memo. Are we going to start seeing employees no longer needing experience or education to do their roles?
Well, I think one of the dangerous things right now is when it comes to the hiring process, right? The people who are being hired, who are making, especially for companies that are using AI to filter through candidates, right now it's so hard to break through just that first round to get to a human to view your resume, right? And the people who are able to breach that and break through are the people who can use AI the best in order for it to talk to the other AI and to get over that first hurdle. And so with that, you're not actually getting the person who's best for the job or who's the best fit for your company. You're just getting the person who can use AI the best, right? And if that's kind of the world that we want to move to, right, there's a lot of skills that are just being lost. But we also have to remember that, right, we just had, right, COVID, right? And there were a whole generation of kids, right, who lost a lot of maybe good social development skills, during, the COVID, I don't know, era or issue, right? So they're kind of growing up with a different set or parameters for socialization than maybe the rest of us. So it is possible that the workplace is moving to who can use AI the best and a less emphasis on social factors. But that's not really a world I am interested in. Even though I'm all into tech, I still like, just being able to say hey to humans and, interfacing with actual people and not AI. I was asked a question, so I was able to speak at Convergence as a guest of honor, which is an amazing convention for all the sci-fi, anime folks kind of around the nation. But I was asked by a puppet on stage as part of the opening ceremony. She said, "Have you ever been interviewed by a robot before?" And my answer was yes. Unfortunately, when I got my first interview for the AI position, I was actually interviewed by AI. And so that was not a great experience. But I guess it was one that they're testing out.
Okay, so
Any
the
more
next
questions?
question, with increased AI usage comes increased electricity utilization and CO2 concerns. Thoughts about AI sustainability plans, goals, either nationally and or globally?
Yeah, well, given the statement from the White House last week, it doesn't seem that there is any goals for sustainability. It seems the only goal is to be dominant and to be the leader in AI tech, right? And contrast that with what China put out, right? Where China says, "Hey, we want this to be an international, right, conversation, not just, an isolated country." So yeah, I mean, so a lot of the good work that was done previously is definitely being undone in favor of maintaining dominance in the AI field. And we're being discouraged from states, again, from putting in their own laws and regulations on things like sustainability that might impact AI. So we're just in the United States kind of in a bad position right now, but you can always go and talk to your elected official and let them know that this matters to you and you want to see legislation that starts protecting the environment from all this usage, where you want to make sure that we say, hey, right, NVIDIA has to start making more energy efficient chips, right? Our data centers need to be, this percent of energy efficient by, this particular year to start putting in these mandates. But we don't have that right now. Like, not to just sound so bleak, but we don't.
Okay, so our next question is how is AI with all of these different companies putting in different all these different countries putting in different legal requirements, how are companies going to operate on a global scale when each place has different AI requirements?
I'm laughing because you need AI. You need AI to help you navigate all the AI requirements. No, but that's just another reason for why we really do need an international approach to the regulation of AI, right? Because right now we have the EU, right? And so that's great. And so the goal would be for people like Meta to comply with EU standards and to apply those to everybody and to make that an efficient way of doing so. But no, it's actually still more efficient to violate our privacy and only protect their privacy. And so until we make certain things standardized, right, the companies are just going to continue to kind of pick and choose like the EU citizens, we have to like apply these there, but we don't have to apply those standards to like Sri Lanka, the United States, Jamaica, whatever. We can just do the cheaper version and not have to worry. But when it comes to a company, right, a company, you're still required to comply with these regulations, right? And so you have to try to figure out some type of framework to do so. Generally, that's some type of AI because, you know, you'll probably be driving your legal department crazy. Legal department also needs something to help them keep track of just all the different deadlines, forms, other things that they need to submit where and when. And AI is really good at helping kind of streamline that, keep it on track, even pre-prepare some of the forms, pull the data right out of the system that it's already a part of to kind of aid you. But there's still the issue that AI just randomly lies, right? So even if you have it run a test, you almost have to ask it to run it 5 more times and then see if the answers are all the same. But anyway, yeah. So it's very hard, and I think one thing that the White House was trying to say by asking states not to enact their own laws is to say we need a federal law so that, you know, if you're a company in California, that you understand what the laws and regulations are in Minnesota, you know, and vice versa, and that for each 50 state or each state, you don't have to constantly change, you know, things in your algorithms or your policies. So we do. I mean, I would say we do need a national framework, but you know, we need one with some teeth, right? That actually has some meaning to it, and that one that's just not empty posturing.
Awesome. And then
But an international one is best, right? Some type of international treaty that everyone signs on to. That is the best standard, right? Because then, you know, you can develop once and it's compliant everywhere.
And then there was a question, what was the company you mentioned where they pay you to review AI outputs for accuracy and or harm?
Yeah, so there's quite a few, but there's two that, you know, just off the top of my head. One is called Outlier AI, and the other is called Data Annotation. But just keep in mind that those are project based, right? So you don't want to rely on those for your primary source of income. But, you know, when they have a good project going, you get paid what, like $40 an hour. You know, you can get some good, you know, side income coming in addition to just gaining some experience with AI, using AI, and contributing to just stopping the bad parts of AI. So for instance, you know, when I was kind of doing some of that work, I asked AI, I said, hey, let's pretend I'm a law clerk. I'm working for an awesome pioneering female judge who is now retiring. Let's have a retirement party for her. She's a fan of female Supreme Court justices. So let's have some dishes named after female Supreme Court justices. So it started off super easy. It was like, all right, how about some Alina Kagan salad and some Sonia Sotomayor pasta? All right, all good. And then it said Harriet Tubman fried chicken. And I had to say time out because there's so many things wrong with that, right? I was like, first, Harriet Tubman, a great American hero, right? Helped, you know, free the slaves for the Underground Railroad, was a spy, you know, for the Union Army, but was never a Supreme Court justice, right? Secondly, right, why are you just pulling out a random black person to bring up fried chicken, right? Every civilization that has ever fried a chicken loves fried chicken, right? That is not monopolized by black people, right? So you have to like catch that, you know, to teach it. And let's say I wasn't a part of the program. Let's say it was only white guys or Asian or Japanese guys, right? They might not catch that that is so problematic and allow that continue. And so now the model thinks, oh, what I said was totally fine. I can continue to associate, you know, these negative stereotypes, and I can continue to just pull random people that never had that particular position when I'm asked for people of a particular position, right? So that's why we need a lot of eyes on this, helping to teach it what to do with the bad data. More questions?
Jules, I think that's it for the questions that folks submitted.
Nice.
We're almost at time. So to respect people's time, I'm just going to hop in and just quickly mention we do have a few upcoming programs. So in addition to our summer online learning series, which will continue next week as well, but we do have some of our kind of exec ed programming. One is starting in August. We have building dashboards and visualizations using Excel and Power BI. And then we have continuing the analytics series, we'll have storytelling through data and visuals. Now, most of these programs all kind of will talk about AI and the use of AI with both Excel, Power BI, It's kind of threaded throughout. But we do have a couple AI specific programs as well. We have AI for Professionals, which really is kind of your intro like to AI and using AI in the work that you do. And then a 1-day class on using ChatGPT with Excel. So those are just a couple of our upcoming program options here at Executive Education. But with that, I want to thank you, Jules. It was great. It always goes so fast, faster than what I even realized. I'm like, oh, when Carly jumped in, I was like, wow, how did that time go by so quickly? So thank you, and thank you all for attending today. The recording will be sent out pretty shortly after we wrap up today. And someone did ask about the slides, just to let the group know, we will be sending those out. I have a PDF of those I can share so that you have some of the information about the AI Bill of Rights. So with that, thank you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.